These people are really
Yeah.
stuck in the semantics of, oh, you're not talking about new thought or spirituality or new age, but it's all the same. Christianity, it's all the same thing. Christians have God. Spiritual people have the universe or source. Both of them magic vending machines existing upstairs and who provide all sorts of gifts for us if we do the right things for them. So it's the exact same beast, just has a different name.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm here with Betsy Chasse. Chasse or Chase? Chasse, yeah?
Cassie.
Chasse. Who, among her many accomplishments, produced the celebrated New Age classic, What the Bleep Do We Know?
I actually wrote, directed, and produced.
I wrote, directed, and produced. Okay, cool, right. And yeah, that was like a huge success. That was like a sort of, zeitgeist-defining film, I would say.
Yeah, it was. And it's interesting, as I've been doing a lot of reflection over the last 20-something years, people always ask me, like, of the things that we talked about in the movie, what I don't agree with anything anymore? And I look back and I go, no, I still agree with a lot of what was said in the movie. I don't agree with how people manipulated it into a self-serving model for themselves, but that's a whole story.
Yeah. Who's been the most successful at that?
Who? Well, that's a big question. I mean, I think the entire new age, new thought industry has turned into, I said that I wrote a book in 2014 that was sort of a very nice way of sort of looking at and examining a lot of the new age, new thought tropes, like the law of attraction and what does enlightenment mean and forgiveness and all these like things that people talk about, and really wanted to examine what they really meant and where they came from. And I would say that, there's a line in that book where I say, leave it to the West to make our quest for enlightenment, which literally just means to know thyself, like a romance novel about ourselves,
Yeah.
So I would say that it's hard to pick one person, but, I'd say that everybody, the way I look at it is just like with the bleep, things start out with really good intentions, but, eventually what happens, and I've seen it over and over and over again, is that greed and power become really addicting. And all of a sudden, people that had really good intentions fall more in love with the idea of how much their brand is making and less interested in what they really started out with. If anybody ever read, there's a really old, I'm going to reference a lot of really old books in this conversation. Some of them are really hard to get, but there's a book called Joywriting the Universe where they talk about channeling.
Mm-hmm.
And What the Bleep, interestingly enough, how I ended up on What the Bleep is the two other guys, Will and Mark, who made the movie, were members of this, what I call a cult, the Romulus Cult of Enlightenment. And I went up there and it was great for the first, everything was great for like the first couple of years. And then you get really into the MLMs and the whole hierarchy. And I was grossed out 8 months in. I got eventually kicked out because I wouldn't bow down to Ramtha or Jay-Z Knight. And it was interesting. So there's this line in the Joywriting of the Universe that talks about this very thing, how, I don't disbelieve in the possibility of channeling.
Yeah.
But what happens is human nature eventually takes over. And human nature is selfish and narcissistic and greedy. That's part of, we're survivalists, right? So that's kind of what I think happened. And, not that I want to blame the bleep. I do think the bleep was the zeitgeist for it. But then the movie The Secret came out. And if you talk to the people, I've talked to many of the people that were in The Secret. Funny enough, they all rode the coattails of it, but a lot of them were kind of dismayed. I remember I did an interview with, I think it's Joseph Vitale or whatever his name is. It was funny, when I was setting up the interview with him, we were talking and he said, look, I'm not a guru, I'm a marketer. And I was like, well, that's honest. And he was even shocked because, there's this scene in the Secret where he talks about wanting a bunch of money, and he tells, oh, I meditated on it. And then he said, I told the rest of the story, which is that I did the work to get it. But they took all that part out and just made it sound like he sat on a cushion and magically a check arrived.
Yeah.
And sort of that's what sells now in the New Age New Thought movement is like, I'm going to manifest for myself, and I don't have to do anything for it because I just have to be love and light and it'll all come to me because I'm deserving. And if you don't have it, you're not successful, you get ill, then it must be something that you created. And that's the blame and shame game that really started, I think, with The Secret.
Yeah, let's go through that a little bit more. Sort of like it'd be fun to kind of tease out a little bit of a systemic critique of this sort of kind of new age spiritual world, particularly as it's unfortunately became a prop for Trump and MAGA,
Yeah.
which that's actually one reason I thought to contact you was I read some of your posts on Facebook and I was like, aha, there's somebody who knows what she's talking about and is sharing a lot of the same feelings that I have about what happened in that respect.
Yeah.
But let's just, so for people who don't know, why don't you give us a quick, little bio,
You know
your
how I
career?
am? Why I'm talking about this? Well,
Yeah,
I was a filmmaker who got hired by Will and Mark they came to me and said, we're trying to make this movie. And the movie they wanted to make was called Sacred Science, and it was a complete disaster. And I'm a filmmaker and a storyteller at heart. So I came in and basically crafted what the bleep do we know for them.
yeah.
The narrative, the whole thing. And from that became accidentally, I've said this, I've been saying this for years, like all of a sudden I was opening for Deepak as though I was some sort of, expert on quantum physics and consciousness, but when I had literally just made a movie about it.
Right. And what the
And
bleep included, I remember like Joe Dispenza, who were some of the
all the guys like Joe Dispenza, uh, Candace Pert, who I still really love and who passed,
Yeah,
would love, Amit Goswami, Fred Olin Wolf, Ramtha, a whole bunch of people. It's
yeah,
funny when I went to go make the bleep, originally they were going to do some other thing. And I said, we have to interview people. And I remember calling around to like Deepak Chopra and, gosh, who is that physicist that had done The Elegant Universe? I can't remember his name now.
David Green or something.
Yeah, Green.
Yeah,
Anyway, all these people, and they didn't want to have anything to do with it. So like all the people that
right.
were in the bleep were like kind of nobodies
Yeah,
or semi cool. And we got them, and then they all became famous.
yeah. I still like Amit Goswami quite a lot. I've read
Amit,
a bunch.
Amit's the best. There was a funny story with Amit that I have, because the big takeaway from the bleep was we create our reality, right? And that's true. But I mean, I think, there's only so much you can say in a movie. It's 90 minutes, right? 88, 90 minutes, maybe 100 minutes. No one's going to explain the entire workings of quantum physics and the nature of reality in 90 minutes, in a movie necessarily. But, we did try to portray that we are co-creating reality. And I think what happened is we create a reality because inherently the West, especially, we're narcissists. We want it to be all about us. That's
Yeah,
really the core of humans. And so Amit once said to me, the thing that's important for people to understand is what you're really creating is your perspective of reality. That's really what you're
yeah,
creating. People are not manifesting Mercedes out of their asses. And anybody that tells you that is probably lying to sell you something. And I really appreciated that honesty. I mean, that's kind of what happened with like the Joe Vitales and a lot of the people from The Secret. I mean, they're still selling this notion that if you meditate right and hard enough and you keep everything positive and love and light, magic will come to you. And
yeah,
maybe it does for some people. I'm not saying that that's not necessarily how the law of attraction works, but what happens is when you pick everything about yourself, you lose sight of the reality around you. And that's how we ended up where we are now. If
mm,
you look at what happened with, all the granola mamas. I mean, I raised my kids partially in the granola. I made baby food from a garden my own garden.
yeah,
I was in it. But I struggled a lot with this notion that we never tell our children no. Like that was a big thing. And, they can't have this and they have to have this. I look at a lot of those kids that are, the same age as my kids now, and ugh, they're totally unself-aware. They care only about themselves, and they don't care about humanity in general. The empathy is lost. It's ironic that the group that wants to talk about empathy and compassion and consciousness has the greatest lack of empathy I've ever seen. And part of it comes from this arrogance that they know better.
Yeah.
Right? They've been taught. And so, you combine this hate for it's complicated, Daniel, but I'm going to try to break it down to you. Combined
Yeah.
in the new age, new thought world, you have a lot of people that mistrust the establishment, rightfully so.
Mm-hmm.
Big Pharma is not our friend. I am here to tell you that. However, Big Pharma is not science, and they've sort of lumped Big Pharma in with science. So therefore, all science is bad. Then you get people like Mickey Willis and a bunch of other people who want to profit off of that fear, literally profit off of that fear, because it makes them money. And so they run around perpetuating all the conspiracies and fear-based stuff under the guise of, we care about people, and we know, we understand that people have the right to choose what goes into their body, and we really care. But what they're really doing is the same thing that Big Pharma is doing. And it's funny, there's an interview in the LA Times with Mickey Willis from way back when COVID was coming out, where he literally says, we over sensationalized that movie because we knew it would sell.
Which movie was that? That was, what was it called again? It was
It was the anti-vax.
COVID conspiracy. No,
I don't know what
pre.
it was. But anyway, and that's how everybody wants to murder Fauci. And, people can't step back and have real conversations because.
I mean, I knew Mickey years ago, and he didn't seem like such a terrible person. He seemed kind of nice. I mean, I guess he was partially a believer, to begin with, right? In what he was doing, what he was selling.
I think so, but I think also you have to look at the underlying
Pandemic. That's what it was. Pandemic.
pandemic. Yeah, you have to look at the underlying trajectory of the last 75 years, right? So we have World War II. Now we're sort of in this cycle of enlightenment, right? And it's all about the pursuit of happiness and bettering ourselves and being good people. And then what comes in is you got people like, I keep mentioning things. I wrote this the other day, the daughter of one of the people that was a big seller in sales and marketing, and teaching people in leadership, right? You have Warner Earhart, you have all these people that are coming in like the 70s and 80s, and it starts out great. But then what happens, just like it happens in any industry, is money starts to get real big. And then all of a sudden, decisions stop being made based on what's right and good and better for the people, and more about what's better for the brand. I mean, it's the same exact thing that happened with and medicine and Big Pharma. What started as, hey, we want to, polio vaccines and all these really good things, turned into, how do we make money off of this? When anything becomes for profit without a sense of sort of even, I'm a little for conscious capitalism, although I don't even know if that's possible at this point. When it starts to really focus on, you've got shareholders, investors, and profit, alternative health is as bad as Big Pharma. But they've pitted, and one of the things that they love to do is they pit one against the other. So if you're for alternative health, you have to be against Big Pharma. Right? So now all the alternative MAGA people have an enemy. It's all Big Pharma's fault. Instead of saying, wait a minute, it's all money's fault. It's all greed's fault. We have to look at this. But the alternative health industry is just as evil in many ways of their practices as Big Pharma.
Yeah.
But nobody wants to talk about that because there can't be gray in these conversations. You're either one, like, I'm one of those people. I'm not a big fan of vaccines necessarily, but I'm not against them.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I did not vaccinate my kids until they were 3, 4, 5, and 6 years old.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm a white woman of privilege. I had the opportunity to have that conversation with my doctor. A lot of people don't, right? But that doesn't mean I'm against vaccinations. It just means I'm not a big fan of the way the big pharma now sells them, because I do think it's a little bit of an overload on babies. But I can be rational about that. That doesn't mean I want to take away vaccines. And it also doesn't mean that I have the right to have any sort of conversation around legislation about what you do with your children.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the arrogance with the new age spiritual woo-woo crowd is they've decided that they know better for everyone. Another group did that, Christianity. As far as I'm concerned, the minute somebody announces to me, oh, I'm spiritual, I go, oh, that's just as bad as saying you're Christian right now.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Mm.
Sorry, I have lots of rants about this. It's hard to
Yeah, no, for sure.
track, but
That's why I wanted to chat with you. But let's go back a little bit chronologically. So you did What to Bleep, was a huge hit. You did a sequel. That you also wrote some books, and you recently did some other stuff in the fields. You want to?
yeah, I mean, we didn't do a sequel. Basically, everybody thinks Down the Rabbit Hole is a sequel. It's not. It was just the director's cut.
Okay.
Again, this is funny because this is marketing. It was just a director's cut, but Fox, who was in charge of distribution at that point, wanted to release it as a sequel because they thought they'd make more money,
I see.
right?
Okay.
And ironically, people came back and they're like, "This is basically the same movie with added footage." I'm like, "Yeah, that's called a director's cut.
I see.
That's really all it was." But so did that, and then I've done a bunch of books, and I rode the coattails of Bleep for about 5 years.
Yeah.
And then I did some distribution. And what happened is, after traveling around and being around so many of these people for about 5 or 6 years, I just started to be like, this is ridiculous. These people are like, what's happening is the weaponization of a lot of these concepts. Now,
It was around like 2005, 2006, kind of.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, people started to say, well, they created their reality, as if somehow somebody gets in a car wreck and it's now their fault. I mean, it might be
Right.
their fault. Maybe they weren't
I mean,
paying
at
attention.
Burning Man, everybody always talk about manifestation.
Yes, and
He's an amazing
metaphysics
manifester.
and
She's
the
a
law of
manifester.
attraction and money. And it's all the underlying thing of all this is you're not enough unless you're successful. And buy this book, buy this crystal, do these things. And the thing about it is, like, there's some truth to all of it. But just like, these things, what happens is now the big, right around 2000, I think it was 2005, the sales funnel became a big thing, right? And email marketing became a thing. And people, 2008, we had a big crash. People were really desperate and they were really looking for ways to recreate themselves and reinvent their lives. And it's great when you get 15 emails in a row telling you how this is going to fix everything for you. And it's just $499 and you can become a life coach. And now we've got like everybody in there. I mean, I could go outside and throw a rock and probably hit 20 life coaches.
Yeah. There's a lot of life coaches out there.
And Reiki. My other rant is Reiki masters. Like, you can take a weekend course now and be called a Reiki master.
Yeah.
Like, I ended a relationship probably because of this. I dated a guy and he wanted to be a Reiki master, and he went to his weekend courses. He called himself a Reiki master, and he didn't do any other work. Like, no other research, no other study, no other like rigorous examination. He just decided because he could raise his hands and they got warm, he was a healer.
In fact, if people watch to the end of this conversation, they'll be Reiki masters.
That's exactly right. And we should each make $599 per each of them. It's insane to me. I did a series. You can watch it. It's on Amazon Prime. It's called Bliss Up, Energy, the Ultimate Healer. And the reason that I did that series was because, again, there is absolute scientific fact that certain forms of energy healing that are legitimate have benefits, health benefits. For instance, there's a study that says that people that do any sort of meditation, relaxation, or have some sort of Reiki, they actually have true Reiki practitioners. I don't call them masters, Reiki practitioners in about 10,000 hospitals around the world. If you have a session with one of them before you have surgery, you will have a better outcome in the end. Like, you'll have less anesthesia, your recovery time will be less. That is scientifically proven, right? But there's nothing, and even like ions and some really amazing people doing research, nothing proves that energy healing is going to cure cancer.
Right.
But
By the way,
go ahead.
we got a nice comment in the chat from Marjorie Shalita. She said, "New Age and New Thought, because there's something called the New Thought movement, are not to be conflated. They're not the same, in my opinion. New Thought goes back to the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt. It has its roots in the Transcendentalist movement in New England in the late 1800s via Emerson, Thoreau, and so on.
Right.
Those are interesting. Yeah, I mean, still, I mean, a lot of the American version of New Thought, which my friend Mitch Horowitz is like the big kind of like historian of, is a little bit low grade. It's kind of
Yep.
like the power of positive thinking, think and grow rich, and so on. Very, very American, very pragmatic. Although I have to admit, I do get quite fascinated by something that a number of people have pointed out, including my friend Gary Latchman in some of his books, that Trump himself grew up in the New Thought movement because his preacher was Norman Vincent Peale, who wrote The Power of Positive Thinking. And apparently Trump had total, as we can imagine, ADHD and couldn't listen to anybody, but he would actually listen to Norman Vincent Peale speak for hours and clearly applied a lot of those techniques to his life and his work. In that basically Peale was like, look, if you want to accomplish something, deprogram any negative thought that you're not going to get it or that you didn't get it, and just completely. So, Trump used to sort of go into like a little meditative trance before he did his reality TV show. And even the way he did the whole thing around the not losing the last election, it was like, no, I could not have lost that election. And so he has kind of shown in a weird way the power of these occult practices, if you're a certain type of personality and able to sort of like keep things very simple. He has, it seems like he's manifested a lot of reality using these new thought techniques in a strange way.
Well, and also, he's a great cult leader. Great
Yeah.
cult leaders are charismatic, they're bigger than life. And because of his 100% belief in everything that comes out of his mouth, people tend to believe that because most people are in such self-doubt all the time. And you get into a space with somebody who's so confident, you begin to question yourself. This is why, I was married to a narcissist for 10 years and went through a significant amount of emotional abuse. It took me years to step back and go, wow, how did I end up there? Like, people often ask, like, look at what happened at Nexium, right?
Yeah.
Really charismatic leader, really smart man.
I don't find that guy charismatic at all. He's so unpleasant to listen to. It's just like,
I agree with you, but then you
yeah,
have
but
people like
obviously it
Mark
worked.
Vicente. Mark
Yeah.
Vicente was his second.
Yeah.
Funny, Mark Vicente made a whole series basically trying to cover his ass from what happened at Nexium and blame it on everybody else but himself. But Mark
Yeah.
Vicente was the second to Keith. He knew everything that was going on. He is charismatic, he's handsome. So you use those tools along with the think and grow rich and this is how I am and I'm this and how that confidence. And a lot of people want that confidence and they're going to buy in. And that's the sad truth is that because underlying all this is we've been told to pursue happiness, you have to be successful. You have to be rich. You have to be perfect and healthy. You have to have this body. And layer on top of that, the patriarchy, where, listen, the spiritual movement is reeks of patriarchy. Women are supposed to be loving and kind and sing and heal and all these wonderful things. We're not allowed to be strong and powerful.
You mean like the goddesses? You're supposed to be
Right,
the
we're all
goddess.
goddesses. That's been
Yeah.
sold for years. You're a goddess. You're,
Mm.
find your feminine. Well, and what the definition of feminism keeps morphing into what now is trad wife.
Yeah.
If you look at it, 10 years ago was be a goddess and be feminine, and now it's trad wife. This
Yeah.
is how
It's
things go.
fascinating. Yeah.
And trad
Well,
wives
I
are
guess,
all about. Go ahead.
yeah. No, I guess I was going to say that, I mean, somebody pointed out in the chat also there's differentiations between, when we're talking about New Age and spiritual and Christian, but also there's a lot of overlap and there's a lot of merging happening. I see a lot of people who I knew from, Burning Man, transformational cultures, who were kind of like, I would say, hippie, left, New Age spiritual, who've now become like hippie right Christian spiritual.
But the thing is, we can argue semantics. These people are really stuck in the semantics of, you're not talking about new thought or spirituality or new age, but it's all the same Christianity. It's all the same thing. It's all the same game. So Christians have God. Spiritual people have the universe or source. Both of them magic vending machines existing upstairs and who provide all sorts of gifts for us if we do the right things for them. Right? So it's the exact same beast, just has a different name. The New Age movement is all about control. Control your thoughts. Anger is bad. You have to forgive everybody. If you don't forgive, you're unhealed and there's something wrong with you. Look at what happened with the landmark. I did the landmark. Right. Actually, what was it called? Well, I forget the landmark forum. I did it right after Warner disappeared. I was working for a company as a PA, and the CEO of that company made us do a management because they had a big management program. And I did the first course, and the CEO saw, wow, you're really good. I'm sponsoring you. So I did a bunch of their courses. The entire crux of their course is don't be mad, don't cry. It all happened to you. You got it. And now guess what? Now that you get it, you don't have to take personal responsibility. You don't have to take personal responsibility for anybody. So people were coming out of the Landmark Forum for the last 10 years. I know that I'm an asshole, but I accept and love myself. And then they continue being an asshole. It's like permission to be abusive. Well, or the word sort of in the New Age movement is, I'm speaking my truth. As if somehow my truth is the only truth. That's the way that's been preached. Speak your truth. No, this is my truth. I don't give a shit if anybody listening today believes a word I have to say. I don't need it to be fact or truth. This is just what I think. And we've lost the definition between opinion and fact because everybody now has a truth that is the most valid thing.
And that kind of predated the current internet social media clusterfuck. I mean, that was already kind of like forming in parallel, you think? Or,
I think so. And the internet, there's a great documentary everybody should watch. It's called The Great Hack. And what's fascinating about it is the way that they explain how a young woman specifically, but how people understood the sort of world, the container that Facebook specifically was, and how it was a big echo chamber because of the way the algorithm worked. And they manipulated that so much that it's the same thing that happens when people watch Fox News. When you don't take in other information and all you see is this, then that's all you're going to start to believe. People overestimate how intelligent humans really are. We're literally programmable computers.
Does seem like that point. Yeah.
If you understand the way the brain works, if I sit and watch the same news show every day, I develop a trust with the person on the TV because he smiles and he's wearing a nice suit and he's calming. All of that stuff plays a role. And then all of a sudden, I only believe that person. That's sort of how our brains operate. And so when you can start to realize, wait a second, I'm a programmable machine. And if I only listen to this guru, that teacher, and they pretend that I'm getting all this cool information that they're giving me, or then all of a sudden I'm in an echo chamber. And that's what happened with the internet, is we built little echo chambers where we're all existing. And people that were sort of anti-vax they watched something called Pandemic, and Mickey Willis was a good guy, and why would he lie to me? And he's speaking the truth because one of the things especially in some of the more fringe New Age circles is, the conspiracies and everybody's out to get you and all big pharma's bad. And there's a giant mistrust for the government, which I don't disagree with. But so they all decided, Trump's going to fix everything. And they're still waiting for that. The other big narrative that everyone's waiting for is the age of Aquarius, right? So all these people are out there going, well, we kind of have to have this bad thing happen because it's part of what's going to bring in the magic of the age of Aquarius. Like, people think the age of Aquarius literally means they're all going to be ascending up to the sky. Like, how is that any different than the rapture is my curious question. But
well, the rapture is less democratic. It's only if you're Christian faith. Yeah.
But But it's like, so they're thinking, they put their heads in the hand and they stand back and they hide and they like, I'm really just trusting the universe has it all. And so that gives them, that's the spiritual bypass. That's the spiritual bypass. First of all, Jesus, Buddha, most of the true gurus and teachers wouldn't be tolerating any of the shit that's going on. They'd be out on the front lines with it. It's like,
Yeah.
but what happens is that so much of what the old ancient Greeks, which by the way are also books just like the Bible, stories, if you look at all those books, they've all been manipulated into a safe, easy way for me to sit back, stay quiet, and just pretend that I'm spiritual, as opposed to standing up and going, hey, what's happening right now is not okay.
Yeah. So how do we get, the spiritual people who I really think had an important role to play in throwing this last election to Trump?
Absolutely.
How can we get them to go sane again? Is that possible, or do they just have to go through their individual catastrophic, kind of confrontations with realities? It gets increasingly dark.
I mean, there's lots of ways I think that people individually can reach out. My way is, as you've probably read, I'm very sassy. I'm very confrontive. I have access to a lot. Part of what you responded to is that I've started calling out on social media some of the bigger name people openly, saying, hey, somebody, like I just did it the other day, somebody posted a thing that literally said something to the effect of, the universe accepts for both and or, and we should be doing the same.
Right.
And I was like, wow, that is gaslighting at its finest. You
Right.
just literally said what Trump said the other day, whenever he said about the Nazis in Charlotte. There's some good people over there,
Right.
you know? So that's how I do it. And when I confronted her on her page about it, I think she was overwhelmingly surprised at how many people agreed with me. And so I think one of the things that's happening, it's interesting when you watch the rebrands starting to happen. Like Brene Brown is doing a rebrand now. She's now going to be doing leadership courses, right? Because there's more money in that. She's done with trauma. Now she's moving over to leadership. Look what happened to Elizabeth Gilbert. Elizabeth Gilbert was the white woman's friggin' queen of everything because, she wrote Eat, Pray, Love. She's this spiritual, wonderful woman sharing and bearing her soul. And she came out with a book that is a disaster because it's who she was from the beginning. And a lot of people feel angry. And what I think has to happen is enough people have to stand up, and enough people are. I've been doing it for 10, 15 years. But a lot of people have to start up and saying, hey, you know what? I'm not going to follow you anymore because I think you are not standing up for what's really going on in this reality.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people like to pretend that they don't exist in this reality. They're meat packets, they're star seeds. There's lots of terminology that has been used for a very long time to get people to disassociate from what's happening here. Because they're not a part of this, because they can ascend whatever their story is. So
Right.
they
Well,
don't
that's
have personal
no.
responsibility. What?
I mean, what you're saying is really resonates with me because, yeah, I have a lot of friends who are very sophisticated and privileged. They go to Burning Man. They're into like sound healing and
All
psychedelic,
that stuff.
and they just are so disengaged from what's happening with the rise of fascism, the
They've been
destruction of the
programmed
Constitution.
because they've been told engagement is not spiritual. Engagement, if you're engaging with the negativity, then you must have something wrong with you. You
Right,
must be angry. You
because you're
must,
like bringing in that frequency or something, or you're
right.
like calling.
That's the programming that has been happening for a very long time.
Yeah.
So all of us over here that engage with it, he's just angry. You're fucking right. I'm angry. My kids are young and they deserve the world I promised them. I'm going to stand up and do something about that, you know, but the programming, especially if you look at the gurus and the new age and even the new thought and Christianity, it's mostly white, wealthy people
Yeah.
who are privileged, who say things like, you talk about the MAGA crowd. Well, I don't think people on Snap should be able to eat candy bars and buy soda. You know, they are totally unaware of what a food desert is,
Yeah,
right? They are totally unaware that most of the population can't afford the granola that they buy every week. But they just live in this alternate reality all the time because that's the only reality they see, because that's the only reality they want to see. Because if they look at anything negative or scary or bad, then that's going to happen to them.
right.
It's like we are literally computers that can be programmed, and they are
Yeah, yeah. I
programmed
mean, and
as Christians.
underlying it, yeah, underlying it is capitalism, right? So it's like because we have to compete with each other. So with Tony Robbins or somebody like that, the whole focus is on how do you become, or you said Brene Brown is now doing leadership. It's all about how do you become this big leader? How do you make your company successful and so on. So it's like a kind of corporate or entrepreneurial spirituality.
Well, the new buzzword, well, it's not new, it's been around for a while, is conscious entrepreneur.
Yeah, it's been a
Like
while.
we don't need any more conscious unless your entrepreneurship is finding ways to use money to solve problems that are real. Like we don't need another line of supplements. We don't need, another cool product that's going to be only used for the rich. Like in my series, in the energy healing series, one of the things that, this is how capitalism fucks everything up. There's like when I was filming that series, I was having a thyroid issue. So I went to a doctor, and the doctor was like, "We have to put you on this medication. You're gonna have to go on it for the rest of your life." And I was like, "Whoa, I'm not sure I want to do that." Right. So then I went to my Chinese medicine doctor. Luckily, I have the wherewithal and the ability to go to a Chinese medicine doctor. Right. That shit is expensive. So I went to him. He gave me some stuff. It tasted like dirt. I was taking it for 30 days. During that time, I went to film with this woman, Dr. Ann Baldwin, who is teaches Reiki and is a Reiki, like legitimately is a Reiki master, down in Arizona. And she had this machine. It's a diagnostic machine, right? Now you think about when you go to the doctor, you got to do blood tests, you got to do piss tests, you got to do like all this shit, right? All of which is billable, right? All of these billable tests. So I sit down, she goes, "Give me your hand." And she puts my top one of each of my tops of my fingers, because we have little I'm not going to probably explain this 100% right because I don't remember all the terminology, but like electromagnetic field that we actually all exist. We always like to call it aura. I believe it's called electromagnetic field in the science world. Same thing. She puts my fingers into this machine, prints out a report, and she looks at me and she goes, "You have a thyroid issue." And I went, "Yes, I do." And so I asked her, I said, "Well, why isn't this machine available in the US?" And she said, "Because it would eradicate 80% of the billable tests that people bill for."
Yeah.
So that's capitalism, right? Imagine if that machine was available everywhere. How much easier would it be for people to understand what was wrong with them?
One of the main people who's featured in What the Bleep Is I Remember was Joe Dispenza, who's gone on to be a very big deal, and like a lot of my friends really have enjoyed his retreats. I read one of his books and I immediately got kind of turned off by the way he was using evidence. He sort of claims science, but it feels more like scientism or something. And
The thing about Joe is, he's in it for the money, just like they all are. And if
mm,
it's true that everything he's saying is curing cancer and growing back teeth, why aren't millions of people getting healed for free then?
right,
If it's true, right? But instead, in order to get that miraculous healing, you have to go to a $5,000 or a $10,000 retreat.
right,
But what I want to know is, if that's true, why are they not out at the cancer, the where people are getting radiation, et cetera, and saying, "Hey, we want to give this to you for free,"
right.
if it's true?
Yeah. And also I noticed in his books he talks about, oh, so and so had stage 3 cancer and they did my course and it was gone. But I'm sure there are many I'm sure that did happen to a number of people, but I'm sure there's also a number of people who came with stage 3 or stage 4 cancer and died after, or
So in my
it did,
series,
and
I
he
have a
doesn't mention
woman.
that. So that's like this thing of like programming the mind into this false positivity in a way.
Well, there's a really, you might enjoy it. There's an episode in my series where a woman needed a liver transplant, and she had to wait 6 months before she could get the liver transplant. And there was really nothing besides she was having also this issue with her lungs filling with liquid. There was nothing really that Western medicine could do until she got the liver transplant, right? So she legitimately, and it's trackable. Because she wanted to be able to track it medically. She was going to the doctor and she was doing energy healing at the same time, right? Within about 3 weeks prior to her getting to do her transplants, she went to the doctor and they said, "Wow, you've really healed yourself a lot. You don't need a liver transplant." Now, she also changed her diet radically, right? She did a lot of holistic things and she wasn't 100% healed and perfect, but it did work for her. And she said something really interesting because in the interview that I appreciated, she said, "Look, I got lucky. Somehow this worked for me. But if it doesn't work for you, there's a lot of guilt and shame being perpetuated by people that say, well, you must not have meditated right, or, oh, you must deserve it because you have bad karma." There's a lot of stories and negativity that go with people that it doesn't work for. So I appreciated that she was like, "Look, I can't sit here and say 100% it was the energy healing. I can't say that it was my green juice, but what I did worked for me."
Yeah.
And that's and people need to understand that that we have a lot in the new age, new thought. I call it new age because it's all Christianity. There's a lot of guilt and shame perpetrated on people who aren't, are suffering. People that are angry are bad. People that are suffering must not have done something right, or they created, or there's some, my big pet peeve is, well, in the void, they chose this life so that they could suffer to learn a lesson. Well,
Right.
guess what? All of that is bullshit as far as I'm concerned. This is Logan's Run. I call this the plane of experience. We're all dropped here. Every single one of us has a lesson to learn. And the lesson isn't just love just because. I think the lesson is, how can we be a good person? How can we care about each other? How can we take care of each other? How can we be compassionate, empathetic, thoughtful humans? Not, can I sit in my studio surrounded by all my crystals that I spent, $400,000 on my special cushion, and meditate and call myself enlightened and donate every once in a while.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So if you were going to remake What the Bleep, how would it be different this time? What would you, how would you approach the topic differently?
I think that I would really add that one piece. I think I'd hit the concept of we are co-creators
Hmm.
a little stronger. I think the narrative, I create my reality, leaves out the participation and the responsibility that you have in the reality that you're in.
But do you think that would have made the film much less successful because it was, if it fed into that little
I don't
narcissism?
think I understood it then.
Yeah.
When I brought on to the Bleep, I didn't know any of this.
Yeah.
I was really reading and participating I interviewed everybody along with Will and Mark. We did all of that together. And I was trying to make a story about one woman and use her as an example. Right. So in her caricature, she learned she creates a reality. And I think I would have probably made that more clear to people that
Yeah.
it's a co-collaboration. We are co-collaborating.
What's your perspective on RFK Jr.? Have you had personal connections with him or spent time with him?
I've never spent time with him personally, but I have done a lot of research um, and talked to a lot of people. My perspective is that he is as bad. He's not a nice man. I mean,
Yeah.
he's an opportunist. This is a man who saw autism as an opportunity for litigation, right? And so he started this nonprofit, which, by the way, I believe pays him personally $500,000 a year. right? To be their spokesperson. Families contact that nonprofit to try to get referrals to lawyers to try to get payouts. And those lawyers paid RFK Jr. for those referrals. So it's a money racket.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, if I always say to people, always follow the money, especially if it looks too altruistic and wonderful to be true. I guarantee you there's always a profit for somebody. And for RFK Jr., anti-vax was a very lucrative world for him. And now, as you know, our health secretary, it's incredibly lucrative. Go look and figure out. I bet you somebody, and I don't have time to do this because I don't need to. I know it's happening. Go look at the giant alternative health and wellness brands and figure out who's lining his pockets.
Yeah. But I remember they had a whole thing when he was on his hearings about whether he would be able to get money from legal claims and so on. Let's see. I had another question for you. Oh yeah. So what do we do now? We're in this kind of, a lot of people I'd say are becoming scared, even if they have, I mean, yeah, the Trump administration regime is going to the most extreme what anybody would have imagined. And I thought it was going to be very extreme, and I was warning the hell out of people not to, to fight back against it. But yeah, I mean, it seems like they really want one party rule.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
they're demonizing even Democrats. They're calling them, Stephen Miller, who's basically Trump's brain right now, says that the Democratic Party is a domestic terrorism organization, and they're going to cut off funding from it, and so on. So we're moving very quickly into a kind of shock scenario of kind of a totalitarian Christian theocratic takeover. And I mean, what do you think about that for yourself, for your kids? How do you think people should deal with that? Should we still try to push back against it, give up?
Don't give up. I mean, don't give up. Part of me is pretty convinced it's going to be it's potentially going to be, there's potential for a radical, a violent revolution. And I think, I get hope in, sadly, it has to come to this, but the policies of this regime are hurting everyone and even the people that voted for it. And if you look at the numbers, the number of people that really want this violent regime is very significantly, it was small and getting more reduced as it starts to harm more people. So we're in it now. Like, there's really no going back. Okay. We had a chance to go back. Everyone's thinking the midterms are going to change everything. I'm not even sure we're going to have midterms. So what do? Build community close to home. Become supportive of your neighbors and the people really close to you. Take care of each other. Become engaged. And you know what? The truth is, for me, my weapon, I'm not going to go out and beat anybody up. I'm a 5'2", 55-year-old woman. I mean, I can do a punch if I had to, but where am I going to, what's my sort of revolutionary act is that I'm going to speak up. And I'm not going to be quiet, even in small rooms. I had to be at the hospital the other day, and we were in a group waiting for something, and one person said, "What do you think of Trump?" And there was a Trump supporter right there bashing his mouth. And, I didn't want to start a big fight in the middle of a lobby of a hospital, but I just looked at him and I said, "I'm really sorry, because this is going to come for you too." And I got up and I walked away. And interestingly enough, my silent act of getting up and walking away, I turned around and almost everybody that was sitting around that man got up and walked away. And he was trying to be Mr. Friendly Guy with everybody. And suddenly everybody turned their back on him. And sometimes that's what you got to do. Sometimes you have to say, in this situation, to me, there's if we want to talk about how do we spend the money to build that bridge, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. But if you're telling me that you're absolutely for what this regime is doing, then this isn't a political issue. It's a moral one. And we have to be willing to stand up for our morals and our ethics.
Yeah. Why do you think that? I mean, I guess Trump already got elected pre-COVID, 2016, and then the COVID thing happened. In a way, actually, it was the blame for Trump on his mishandling of the COVID thing, which got him out of office in 2020, which now we can see was kind of a mistake. It would actually probably have been better if he'd won again because he didn't have the Heritage Foundation strategizing for 4 years on how to build theocratic fascism. But then this whole thing on bodily sovereignty became like a massive focus of people in the sort of post New Age like spiritual culture, and that I think really led to people tipping over into Maha and so on. Like, why do you think that particular issue around what happened with COVID became such a defining issue for a whole period, for a whole generation?
Well, because, Democrats are just as inept at things as Republicans are. Neither one of those groups should be run. I'm a big Zoran Mamdani fan, for one thing. I love that guy. And I'm looking for people like him all over the country. Right. Um, but, you know, when the Democrats started forcing vaccines on people, that was the breaking point. The irony is now these same people want to force other people to not get vaccines. So I don't know how they're crying the moral high ground there, or like the righteous high ground. You know, that to me was a breaking point when they started forcing people to be vaccinated, you know,
Yeah.
um, which, and I don't think it was the mask thing. I think that the Republicans and the anti-vaxxers had better messaging on the mask thing.
Mhm.
But I really think it was the forcing the mandatory vaccines.
Right. Well, I think the problem is that some subjects are actually very complicated and ambiguous, and there's not
Right.
always like a right answer. So, when I look at what happened with the vaccines, I think on the whole, they were probably very good for older people and maybe not as good for healthy younger people. And that
Yeah.
should have been more quickly understood and to put into policy. But I think also when you have a unpredictable pandemic that's changing shape, I can understand from a public health perspective, you're just like any method that we can to try to slow this thing down or stop it before it becomes like a super killer, which in
Well,
fact it still could. I mean, it's still out there mutating and
yeah.
so on.
A really good friend of mine is an epidemiologist in Washington, D.C., not actually in the federal government, but over in that area. And I asked her, and she said, the problem is that when that happened, I think we were aware that it might happen at some point, but nobody was really prepared that it was going to happen when it did. And you're right in the sense that it was throw everything that we got at it,
Yeah.
right? But there was a moment when I think it was manageable, right? Maybe later in 2020, right? Early 2021, where I think they didn't need to push the vaccine so hard. And so here again, this is where money comes into play. This is where big pharma gets evil because there was massive profits made on everybody getting vaccines, right?
Right.
And even my friend says that probably you're right. Not everybody needed to get that vaccine right then and there. I don't get a flu vaccine. I never have, you know? And I'm 55. For me, if I become immune compromised or have health issues that require that, I'll get it. I was sick with my daughter just a couple of weeks ago. Both of us really had COVID really bad. I've had COVID 3 or 4 times and never been that sick. And there was a point when I think everybody knew that and they were still perpetuating because what happens is a fight gets brought up. The fight is us and them and us and them. So the rational conversations can't be had. Because there was a lot of people coming out and trying to have rational conversations. But it's just like autism. Autism is caused by vaccines, therefore vaccines are bad. We can't have a middle conversation. And that's part of what's going on in the world in general is there's no like, let's have a rational conversation about this. And that's sort of what a couple of my friends who were in the health and medical field, it's like, yeah, you can't be rational. You have to be hardline one way or
Mm.
another because the sides have been chosen. And so until we as people step back and go, whoa, we need to slow the roll. The same thing is going to happen with AI, by the way. People are
Hmm.
totally unaware about what a lot of this shit, the underlying problem is going to be. People don't realize that in the next 3 to 5 years, I might, I might be exaggerating, but at least 40% of mid-level to entry-level jobs are going to be eradicated.
Right.
They
Well,
don't,
that
they don't know
that
that.
also could be one reason why they're militarizing American cities,
Yep,
because they're aware that there's going to be a lot of economic disruption, and
absolutely.
there's going to be civic
That's
unrest.
exactly why. So, but we can't have a rational conversation about that. About, well, how do we use AI? I'm in the production on a series right now where we talk about AI. How do we use AI to our humanity's benefit, not corporations' profit? Right now, AI is being driven on profit, not
Right.
on human benefit.
Yeah. Totally. I mean, and even there, I mean, there's a lot of stuff right now about the circularity of the AI economy and how and they're kind of like, in a way, I mean, out of ideas for the types of huge profit margins that would justify $1 trillion investments. So now, like, OpenAI is looking at porn bots and
Yep.
advertising because it's just they don't know what else to do with it, really.
Right.
We're almost at the end of our hour here. Maybe if you want to tell people about how they can follow you. I saw you have a Substack. It doesn't really look like you've engaged much yet. Where do people follow your work? What would you like them to check out?
Yeah, you can follow me on Substack. I write like a couple times a week. I do what's called Betsy Rants. So, I'm funny and a little sarcastic. That's my little weapon. You can I have a website, I work in documentaries, I consult with documentaries. I also coach writers, and because I think that, the pen is a powerful tool and people should be sharing their stories. And I think what's going to really turn this around is the good people speaking up and saying no in any way they can. So that's kind of what my message is about. And Substack's easy. I don't love other social media platforms. I kind of like Substack.
Right on. Cool, Betsy. Well, listen, thank you very much. It was
Cool.
great to reconnect, and let's stay in touch, and we'll do this again
Absolutely.
sometime. Yeah.
All right, hon. Bye.
Bye.